Nole Nation, welcome into the Renegade Rundown. This is number 16, I do believe. We got my good friend in here, Jess Coger with PlantTheSpear.com. You can find him on Twitter at PlantTheSpear1, along with my beautiful co-host at JenNole2013. Actually, it's at JenSanti1890 on Twitter. You can check her out. What's going on, guys? Thanks for joining us, Jesse. How's it going, man?
Good, man. Just trying to fight off these these leftover turkey, making you sleepy and whatnot. So just trying to stay awake. The snooze fest watching Miami Boston College, of course. No one cares about that game. That's why it's at noon on a Friday. So, you're probably still out fighting grandmas for TVs and not paying attention to that game. But good, man. Just excited to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
For sure, man. Yeah, definitely. Tryptophan has affected everybody this year, I'm sure, man. Those Thanksgiving meals. It seems like the older I get, the less I really kind of pig out like that, like I used to do in my younger days. So that once or twice a year, when you really go after it, man, you pay for it. It's almost like a hangover,
I
eating that
know.
much food. So just got to try and survive it. But man, we made it all the way through the season. Week 11, or actually week 12, game number 11, we lose Jordan Travis. I'm sure you guys saw the title to the show. That's going to be a big theme. We're going to talk about Tate Rodemaker. He comes in, the gunslinger off the bench, everybody's favorite guy, the backup quarterback, gets his opportunity in week 13 in Gainesville against a Florida Gators team who is 5-6 at the time. But look, they're going to be fighting for bowl eligibility. You've got a game going on, I believe, at 7 Eastern, something like that, 7 or 8 Eastern, night game in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. They like to call it the Swamp. And I don't know, that's a good idea. I guess Swamp is a good idea for that stadium to name it. Kind of the smells and things that kind of emanate out of that place when you get 90,000, 100,000 people stuck in there. Hoping Tate will have a good 70-30, maybe get a good 30% Seminole group out there. I'm sure the Seminoles are going to travel pretty well. But yeah, it's 100% my opinion that Tate Rodemaker is going to kind of step in there and take over this lead role. I guess that's where we can start off with, and we'll let you go and then see what Jen wants to add to it. But what do you think, man? Do you think Tate can step in and be that guy for the Seminoles and take us everywhere we want to go this year?
I do, man. I have this little weird sense of confidence about Tate coming in at quarterback. And, when I got ready for the UF game this week doing a preview on our channel, I went back and I watched the Louisville game from last year because I was like, let me see Tate against a Power 5 defense. And of course, he got off to a pretty rough start in that game. But once Tate gets settled in, yeah, I think he was like 1 of 3 for -6 with a pick. But after that, man, he settled in, and just the throws that he makes. And this is something that you saw against North Alabama too, where the receiver almost really just has to put their hands in front of them and the ball just drops in the basket. I mean, Tate has an arm. And the one thing, you look back to 2014, you had a guy like Sean McGuire come in and save the day against Clemson when Jameis was suspended for a game. And it's like, it's a luxury to have that backup that maybe they're not the most experienced in a game situation, but they have multiple years in the system. They know how to run the offense. And, I'll kick it back to you on this. But one thing that I mentioned on our show after Jordan went down, and I want people to understand that this comes from 0% of a place of a knock on Jordan. This is 100% just talking about the quarterback position. What makes Jordan an elite college quarterback is the entire package, the command of the offense that he has, the dual threat scrambling ability. But he has come so far as a passer, but he's not really that pure passing quarterback. We've heard from people who watch practice that at times Tate looks like he has a better arm than Jordan. So I really do think Tate can make all the throws that you want in this offense. It's just going to be keeping him upright. Now we know he has speed, but he doesn't have that quick twitch, like make you miss in a phone booth type of dual threat ability that Jordan has, but he can make all the throws you want as a quarterback. So, you talk about Ohio State. Who's their quarterback? No one really knows because he's not that household name, but he has Marvin Harrison.
I don't know if you saw that tweet I put out. I put out, who would you rather have?
Right.
Be honest with yourself. Would you rather have the Ohio State quarterback or our guy, Tate Rodemaker?
Right. It's all about the weapons. Tate. Exactly. It's the weapons around him. And he still has Johnny. He still has Keon. He still has all these weapons to make the throws to. The ball, it doesn't matter who gets the ball there as long as it gets there if you got playmakers to go get it. And that's what Tate has.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And hey, I want to kick it to Jen and get her kind of take on this because along with all that stuff, you said it. You saw it click last year in that Louisville game. It started out a little bit on skates, looked more like 2021, 2020 Tate Rodemaker. Moment's a little too big, and then something clicked. I believe it was he pulled a RPO and hit a really good play for a first time to Johnny, and that was it. And what we've seen the videos of him dancing out there, well, he has this thing, going around that people call big dick energy. The moment's not going to be too big for him. This dude has that swag. He's going to go out there and compete, and I don't think there's any way that this moment, on the road at UF is going to affect him. But yeah, what do you think, Jen? You think he's going to come out there and be able to handle this thing? Do you think he's got the swag to, not just win this game at Florida, but go out there and lead this, team of alphas?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of people are underestimating the fact that Tate is like Mike's like quintessential quarterback that he would have looked for. This is a quarterback that he wanted while he was at Memphis. This is his first recruit once he got the Florida State job. Tate was committed to, I believe, USF at the time, or was either on a visit there or something like that. But I think he might have been committed to USF. But this is a quarterback that his system is perfect for. And plus Tate has been in it for 4 years now, right? So I do think, I think Tate's going to be just fine. Like you said, I think he's got the playmakers around him. And if the ball gets there, the ball doesn't care who catches it. And I think he can put it there. I think he can put it there. I do worry a little bit about the sacks because of the offensive line. I think we all have seen that. I just hope that these guys can get out there and, put it into another gear so that maybe Tate doesn't take so long to make those decisions and doesn't put himself in that situation. But with, when you look at Florida's defense, though, one, they haven't been great this year. I think we all know that. But they do have some issues as far as their linebackers are an issue big time. I think Tate can take advantage of that. And I think when you kind of just look at the way he throws, yes, you're right. He doesn't have this like the twitchy speed, but he is athletic. He's not just this huge statue. Now, again, it's going to be the sacks issue. It's going to be the length of time it takes him to make his read. I think we did see in North Alabama when he first came in, he was taking maybe 5-6 seconds, which is not going to work at Florida. So, hopefully, I'm sure they sat down. I'm sure they went over plays and said, hey, what are you comfortable with? We're not going to put you in these situations where you're having to do stuff that you're just not comfortable with in this type of start in this environment at 7:00. So I do think he's going to do well. I do worry about the offensive line and the sacks. That's the only thing I'm really worried about as far as Tate is concerned. Could he make mistakes? Sure. But, I think with Florida's defense, I think a mistake or two, I'm not saying it's great, but, they might not be able to totally capitalize off of that, or we should be able to put ourselves back in a situation. So I don't know that it's going to be something that hinders you. You obviously want to win the turnover battle, but I think Tate's going to do well.
No doubt. We got some comedians in the audience.
It's not an ultra. It's not an ultra. Okay.
So you guys can guess on what the beer is, and we'll let you know what it is. Maybe if it's not an ultra, maybe we'll figure it out before the show's over. But yeah, you had some good points out there. Tate was a tick longer, a little bit over 3 seconds versus, Jordan, who is getting it out a little under 3 seconds. Not nothing crazy, but I do think we will see that improve, like you alluded to. I'm sure they've paired this thing out. This is the first time. And this is one of the big things that people forget about, and I'm sure our subscribers are probably tired of hearing me saying, but this is going to be a game plan just for Tate Rodemaker. Every other time we've seen Tate Rodemaker in a Florida State uniform, it's because somebody else went down and he came in, kind of doing what was on the game plan left after Jordan Travis went down, or, Mackenzie Milton, or whatever the case may be back in 2021. So that's going to help a big time. And one thing that's also going to help keep the pass rush off of them, and a big kind of point of contention and goes into how Tate's going to be able to do this game is going to be the run game. I'm expecting Austin Armstrong and that multiple defense, the word creeper gets thrown around. The they're going to creep around there and they're going to load that box. It's going to be stacked. They're going to stack the box and say, okay, Mr. Tate Rodemaker, beat us with your arm. They're not going to let us run it very easy. And I think kind of the key to the game and for Tate Rodemaker to have success would be really great if he could hit those throws over the middle early. Pull that RPO and hit Johnny Wilson right there or Jaheim Bell where that linebacker just blitzed or safety or whatever the case may be, and really make them pay. And if you can make them pay, it's going to back the safeties off. And if a Trey Benson is healthy, Keziah Holmes, we're going to see these guys get downhill and be able to run it. I really expect the run game to help him. I think the offensive line woes are a bit overblown. I think they're extremely overblown, not so much but by any of us, but by the fan base just kind of as an overall. If you go back and watch the tape, a lot of the missed blocks are by tight ends and, maybe Tate getting a little upset early on, like y'all said, with Happy Feet and backing out of the pocket rather than stepping up a little early on. But what do you think there, Mr. Plant the Spear? What do you think about, his protection? Do you think we're going to be able to run the ball to protect him? What do you think the keys are to keeping him upright and in that pocket and clean throughout the game?
Well, I think the important thing, and I have to agree with Jen a little bit. I am a little bit worried about the blocking, the pass blocking, because we did see some instances where some guys got beat. And I love that Tate keeps his eyes down the field. I love that he progresses through the reads, but his pocket presence is a little sketchy at times. So you worry about, like Jen said, the sacks are what concerns me, but a strip sack, the potential of that's what really worries me when you just don't see that rusher coming. Byers got completely, had a lookout block against North Alabama. Those are the things you worry about. Now, I will say that I heard someone mention that Robert Scott should be back for this game. They kind of held him out for North Alabama because they just didn't feel like, it was better to give him another week there. So I do think the other thing is you might actually see Tate run the ball more than Jordan did. We know he'd been dealing with a lot of injuries this season. And I've always said throughout the whole year, when people get upset that Jordan didn't run the ball, I said, listen, man, the best ability is availability. And if he doesn't want to run the ball because of what happened in the North Alabama game, don't run the ball. That's fine. But I think Tate will run the ball a little bit more. He is healthy. He is, he's kind of lanky, but he's a bigger guy. So it's not like he has to avoid contact. But, you do have to understand that now you have a very limited backup quarterback situation. But I think the thing with Tate is getting him settled in early, because we saw the kind of the clunky starts there before. But one thing that I'm excited about with Tate is no matter how you can get to maybe a potential mismatch. That's what we saw in the Louisville game. Really, it came down to they could not cover Johnny Wilson, and they did not give any safety help in that game. They just basically let that happen. But Tate had the arm to take advantage of that. So you have so many more weapons this year. If you can get a mismatch on Johnny, if you can get a mismatch, if they just cannot cover Keon all night, Tate can hit those throws. So I think you have to not be scared to let him use his arm. And if they want to dare him to pass, I mean, Tate's got a rocket. He can make them pay for that.
No doubt. I agree 100%. I'm really excited to see. I'm not sure what Destin Hill's health is like, but I know, man, he's pretty explosive over the middle. And I've heard, kind of out of practice, Kentron Portier is one to look out with. He has a really good relationship with Tate Rodemaker. And look, Tate's been working with these guys. That's another thing I mentioned, Keziah Holmes. I think they've got a pretty good relationship and working with him second and third units. They've got a lot of work together. I know I've been saying it feels like all year, but watch out, man. I could see Keziah Holmes really make some moves, man, in this game. Before we move off of, just the kind of Tate-centric part of it, while we're here talking about him, I guess we can talk really just break down the entire Florida State offense versus that Gators defense. Is there anything in particular? I know you mentioned the offensive line, but is there anything in particular else about that matchup, our offense versus their defense, that worries you? Do you think they have any defensive linemen that we particularly need to worry about or anything like that, Jim?
I don't. I mean, really, it's a matter of if the offensive line does what they're supposed to do and actually protects and doesn't have any issues or falter or collapse, then no, there's honestly really nobody on the Gator defense. And I know they're big. They are big. Those players are big, but we're not, I think it's poor coaching. I really do. They're not bad players. It's just, no. Their linebackers are not good at all. Their
so
safeties,
young, man.
yeah, they're very young. Their safeties are young too. I mean, it's a very young defense. I get that. But, when you're going up against these guys who have played together for so long on offense, as long as the offensive line holds, I think the offense is going to be just fine. I think
I've seen a lot of. My bad. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying. I think that is basically, and that Tate, can do what he needs to do, and if we don't get turnover happy, then I think you're fine on offense. I just don't. I'm just not seeing it, but I could be missing something.
No, you're seeing it pretty clearly. I think watching the tape, they've got some guys who, in a perfect world, could be pretty good defensive linemen. You look at a guy like Prince Emilion,
yep,
and the guy Desmond Watson, number 21.
They also have a lot of penalties on defense. They also have a ton of penalties on defense.
Yeah, for sure. But Jesse, tell me, what do you see? Because when I look at it, I see their defensive line that has some studs. But the thing is, once you get past that first line or get into the third and fourth quarter, they just can't really, keep it up. I've seen some, pretty rough video clips of Unimillion getting just destroyed, getting blocked on some of those running plays when you go back and look at that Kentucky film and stuff. Yeah. And when you really go back and look at it, my thing when people who get, fans get really too worried about this game and the matchup with the offensive line versus their D-line, et cetera, it's just like, who have they shown that they could possibly do it against? Tennessee, that's it. But outside of that Tennessee game, I mean, their other 4 wins are against teams with a combined 3 wins all together. So I guess that's just where my confidence, comes from in that regard. But I guess the question is, on that defensive line, who is it that we should most worry about disrupting or causing defensive problems for those linemen that we've had issues with here and there?
Well, when you look at their defensive line, they have a lot of beef up front, but they're not. Obviously, at 400 pounds, they're not a very athletic group. And the thing about Florida State's offensive line is they have size. I think they're a little bit slower than they were last year. So maybe your quick twitch defensive lineman might create more of a problem. I think this is kind of the good matchup you have here. You have someone where, sometimes when Florida State's guards or something they pull, they maybe don't get there fast enough. But this is one where you don't have a very athletic defensive line in Florida. So if you can get there, you have the size to push these guys around. And then, like you said, if you get past that first level, I mean, you should have a mismatch at linebacker, a mismatch in the secondary. And you're talking about this defense gave up 329 rushing yards to Kentucky. You gave up 226 to Arkansas. You gave up 329 to LSU. So, I mean, this defense, once you get them on the ropes, there's a little bit of quit in that defense. And, I know Bobby Hill thinks that he's got all these multiple schemes that he likes to run and all that stuff, but
the tool sheds.
Exactly. Like Bobby Hill on speeds and all the things that he says. But I really just think if Florida State sticks to their game plan, I mean, I really do think too, this was something I mentioned, that you never want to see a player go down with injury, obviously, but if you had to make a switch at quarterback, this is probably the best week it could have happened, because you came off a FCS team where Tate got some experience, and now you're going against a defense that ranks in the 90th or around 90th in all their categories. So you should have an opportunity for Tate, a defense that he can take advantage of, and hopefully we can get the run game going too as well to keep the pressure off Tate. That's really going to be big in this game. Florida State really needs to run the ball. I said something in our preview where it's like, you'd have felt fine last year. We ran for over 200 yards in 8 games. You're like, we'll just lean on the run. This year, we've had a little bit of struggle running the ball, but they give up right about what we average per game, which is around 160 yards. So if Florida State can hit that 150-plus mark, that's going to take some pressure off of Tate, and I think that's really going to be the one there. But like you said, man, they got some meat up front, but this is not a very fast athletic defense, and I think Florida State's speed will be the mismatch here.
Yeah, I think we've hammered on their defense quite good enough for this episode, but we got a question coming in on the comments and a good time to flip it here. He says, what about our D going against another possible dual threat quarterback? It's funny how the world works. The whole thing all year has been Florida State and Florida people talking shit back and forth about Graham Mertz and who's better than him and Jordan Travis, like that was ever a conversation. And, the SEC narratives, they just crack me up. They don't even get that the joke is on them. They're like, oh, yeah, y'all said Graham Mertz was going to be the worst quarterback in the SEC, and look, he's one of the best. He said, no, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in the Big Ten. He comes to the SEC, and immediately he's one of the best. Well, what does that tell you?
Right.
Look at those out-of-conference games. But no, unfortunately, Graham Mertz really did have a good year. Some of those stats are a little overblown. It's not like he was really throwing it down the field, a whole bunch of screens, a whole bunch of short game and kind of game managerial stuff. But hey, he was doing it. And there's one thing that coach over there can do in Mr. Napier is he can scheme up some offense. Unfortunately for them, he can't do that and focus on special teams. So that's causing
They don't
a bit
have
of
a
issues
special
down
teams
there.
coach.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's hard for him to keep track of all of it and do the offensive game plan at the same time. But yeah, they're pissed about that. They're gonna have to do something. 2 offensive line coaches, no special teams coordinator. It's all jacked up, and you see the difference. When you have a team like Florida State that really emphasizes special teams and the difference. But long story short, Graham Mertz goes down, and in comes Max Brown. I had to do a double take. I'm like, isn't that guy in the NFL? Yeah, he's been in the NFL for 4 years. Not that Max Brown, the guy that played at USC. This is another Max Brown. He's a redshirt freshman, and he's a heck of an athlete. Not a very developed passer, but he is that dual threat guy. He is that guy who can, bend it around the corner and make plays on you. Think some of the quarterbacks we played earlier in the year, and maybe a Tyrone Jones or a Thomas Castellanos or even a Jaden Daniels. Obviously not as good as those, but those kind of players who can take off and change the game by running it. He can run it and put points up on the board, not run it just to get a first down here or there. Now, that said, is he going to be able to throw the ball enough to back our safeties up and create them opportunities? I don't think so. I think that's what Florida State's going to do. I think Adam Fuller is going to come out there early, and similar to what UF is going to do to us, they're going to kind of stack that box, play man coverage like we have done a ton all year, and really make him similar to what they tried to do to Jaden Daniels successfully, make him one-dimensional, make him stand in there and throw it. And, if he makes 3 or 4 unbelievable throws that end up being touchdowns, and can be the difference in the game, good for them, but I don't see it out of Max Brown. What do you think about Max Brown and his ability to attack our defense?
Well, man, the thing, I agree with your comparison about Kyron Drones. That's who I compare him to as well. 6'2", 220, former 3-star from Oklahoma, number 96 quarterback in the 2022 class. He had 4 offers, Florida, Central Michigan, Temple, Washington, if that kind of tells you, a little bit about where he's at. But, man, honestly, when I turned on the film against Missouri, he's got some potential. He's pretty quick guy. He made some decent throws. I will hand him that. But it's just you come in and you don't have a lot of experience. He only has 12 passing attempts on the year, no touchdowns so far. And I think this is one where I think you made a good point. You want to load the box early. You want to get some pressure on him. He's only been pressured on 3 of his dropbacks. 2 were scrambles. 1 was a sack. So he really hasn't had to throw the ball under pressure a whole lot. But I think this is one where, again, Florida already likes to run the ball. They have 2 quality backs in Johnson and ETN. So this only adds to their running game. It may be kind of more like what you saw with AR at quarterback last year, where you had that dual threat quarterback and you can kind of have a 3-man tandem run game there with him. But I think the game plan here for Florida State is making him throw to beat you, because let's be honest, Pearsall, he's not an elite receiver, but he's a good college receiver. And then the other guy that they have, Eugene, the freshman, he's a good receiver too. But outside of that, that's really it. So you have kind of a limited amount of weapons in your receiving core, and now you have a quarterback that doesn't have a whole lot of experience throwing the ball. I think you want to force them to throw it in this one. And if you do that, I think you have a good chance of success at winning this game.
Absolutely, no doubt. I agree 100%. Anything you want to add on that before we move on, Miss Jen?
Well, I mean, I was just going to say I agree with everything he's saying. I think Florida is going to rely on the slants and screens with Max Brown, and he is athletic, but I think he has the same problem that we are concerned with about Tate, right? And I think when you look at the two, with you're going to be worried about Max's presence in the pocket and how his offensive line is going to show up, because they have 2 that are down. Their starting offensive linemen are down. So that should be a huge concern for them. I would think, with that being the case, he is going to pull it and run it a lot more. I think they do have 2 good, really receivers. I think Pearsall obviously is really good. I think Wilson is really good. But I think if you can close down that pocket like that, I think that's really going to cause them some trouble because with those two down, we just don't know what their backups look like. I think they're very young. And I don't think they've started in a game, obviously, like this, of course.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree. I agree with everything y'all said. I hate to not be too concerned. I know this thing isn't guaranteed, but at the end of the day, man, I just really like what Florida State has versus them. And, if we let that guy, Max Brown, come in there and tear us up, we deserve to lose. It's not going to be on Tate Rodemaker or anything else. It's just you deserve to lose if your defense can't handle them as well as your defense has played all year. I mean, you're up in some elite categories when it talks about pass defense and stuff like that. But go ahead, Jim. What were you about to say?
I was just going to say, I think he is a little bit like how do you say it? I can't say it.
Castellanos. Yeah.
Castellanos. I do think he's a lot like him. I found it interesting though that Florida pulled, or if you try to go look at any of his film that they actually had, it's all gone. It's taken down. So you can't really go look at it. But he is very athletic. I'm not taking anything away from the kid. He did have it did look like it opened up the offense against Missouri. It did look like it gave him some life, but that's also kind of adrenaline. I also don't think Missouri's defense is anywhere close to what Florida State's is, to be honest. It might sound homerish of me to say that, but when you look at them, these look like two different tables that people are eating at. I just don't see it in the same way. So yeah, he did look like he brought the offense to life in that game, but you're doing it against a little bit different of a defense than what you're going to be facing this week. So again, we just don't have a lot to go off of.
I will say one thing. I was going to say one thing to what Jen said that I think is actually a good point that is going to benefit Florida State is when you talk about what he did against Missouri, he is a completely 180 from what Graham Mertz is. He's more of that mobile guy, more of a throw it down the field guy if he does throw it. But you had to make that switch in the middle of a game. So you weren't probably expecting him to play. At least now Florida State had, when you're talking about two different styles of quarterback, Florida State has a week to know we have another daggone mobile quarterback to prepare for. And you've only prepared for 7 of them this season or whatever. So you have that experience. So at least you're not switching pace mid-game and trying to adjust to something that maybe you didn't expect. Because honestly, when I saw him come in, man, I was like, who is Max Brown? I thought it was the guy from the bowl game or the other guy that's not, the other guy who's not allowed to play in school zone. So it's like, I just was like, man,
I forgot about him. Oh my God. And he was a Florida recruit too.
Yes.
Oh man. That was uncalled for, man. He was cleared all that stuff.
I'm sorry.
He's a good kid, man, a good quarterback. But look, man, yeah, I agree. I agree with all that stuff. But at the same time, we got to go out there and handle business. We're ready. Like you said, we've been preparing for him all year. I think we've got a great game plan. We played Jaden Daniels better than anybody has all year long. So I'm pretty comfortable with that ability. And look, guys, we have a gunslinger on my side. I had guys in the comments from our last video talking shit, saying, "Oh, how can you call him a gunslinger? He doesn't even have the starts. He doesn't have the reps." So I want to have this little conversation when we move on. I know Jen has her laptop, I think, right there. She can fill us in. Maybe we can talk after this about moving to the ACC title game and if there's been any upsets, you can let us know about that. But look, Tate Rodemaker, guys, when I tell you Rodemaker is a gunslinger, it doesn't mean that I'm saying he's Brett Favre. It doesn't mean that he's going to be one of the most prolific passers of all time in this stuff. Look, gunslingers, they either live or die on their arm. Some gunslingers throw 1 touchdown and 10 picks and they get benched and that's it. I don't think that's it with Tate Rodemaker. I think he's going to be that dude, end up being your starter next year. But look, the gunslinger moniker applies. You think back to former quarterbacks. You brought one up from the past, Sean McGuire. Think a guy like Clint Trickett that came in there as a backup, just ready to sling it, super, super experienced and knowledgeable in that offense, just waiting for their opportunity. Florida had to turn to a red shirt freshman in Max Brown, a red shirt freshman. Let that sink in. We're talking about a 4th-year player who seems like he's been at Florida State as long as Mike Norvell's been here. Well, that's because he has been here as long almost as Mike Norvell has been here. And, yeah, I think people are underestimating and kind of, diminishing him. But I'm all about it. It's kind of the name of the podcast here. I think Tate's going to take us all the way. Any final comments on that before we move on to talk to some other things?
The last thing I'll say on Tate is I agree, man. Like I said earlier this week, I just kind of have this weird sense of confidence about Tate. Like almost this like part of you that's excited to see what his arm can do for this offense. And I think that you bring up a good point. You're turning to a guy who is experienced, a guy that people who watch practice have reported that he has made some just amazing NFL type throws. And I just think that when you have this amount of talent that they have at the skill position, I think this is a guy who's going to be able to take advantage of it. You know, don't be surprised if you see an ugly interception in this game. If you see one of those, golly, Tate moments. But at the same time, don't be surprised if he throws for 300 and a couple touchdowns because he's got the arm to do it. And again, he can expose mismatches with throws down the field like we saw against Louisville. And then, you know, most of our passes this year that have been successful have kind of been chunk plays. You just kind of chunk it up and let your guys go get it. Tate can make those throws. So, man, I'm actually really excited to see a guy who can run an RPO and pull the ball. He can move the pocket. I'm not, you know, obviously you miss Jordan, and Jordan's command of the offense is something that you cannot replace. But I think as far as just purely from a passing ability, if Tate can settle in, overcome the nerves, they can keep him upright. I'm excited to see this offense with Tate at quarterback. And like you mentioned, you're going to find out a lot for 2024 really quick. In these two games, you're going to know whether you need to go to the portal or not.
Yep. It might not be twitchy, but look, the dude a hair faster on the top speed. The dude gets up there in the 20 miles per hour. So for sure. Do you have a prediction on the game? I guess we can get it here before we wrap up the UF breakdown. Me and Jen gave ours on Tuesday's episode, but do you have a prediction you want to give for the folks?
I do, man. And it's funny. I will just say that I saw like Josh Pate from whichever network he's from, 247 or whatever, said that he thought the difference in this game was going to be Florida being good at home. And so when I looked at the record, when I started taking my notes, I was like, oh, they're 4-1 at home. That's great. But when you look at the four teams they beat at home, they have a combined record of 16-38. It's an 0-10 FCS team, a 3-8 Charlotte team, a 2-9 Vandy team, and Tennessee, who, credit to them, that was a good win for them, but they've been blown out the last 2 weeks. So I think there's a lot of fluff when you talk about that 4-1 home record. I think that Florida State, not Tate Rodemaker perhaps, but they went into Death Valley. They played in front of that sold-out, loud crowd. They've seen that atmosphere before. So I think as long as they stay in their lane, play their game, don't let Florida bait them into any stupid penalties or anything like that. Just stay focused on your mission because your season's a lot bigger than this Florida game. This is it for them. This is their Super Bowl. I think Florida State comes out, gets it done. I'm going to go with 31-20. I think they could open it up a little bit more, but I think they're going to start out a little easy, letting Tate get in rhythm. You could see a turnover here or there. It is still the Swamp. They still can run the ball, which is something we struggle to stop. But I got the Noles winning 31-20.
Yeah, that's super similar to all of ours. I can't remember what yours, Jim, was, but mine was 34-17. Yeah, but we're all kind of in the same mode of, look, I could see this thing being tied up. Whatever, going into the fourth quarter, it could be something like 2017 Noles, and then we score 2 touchdowns. That's what I have going on. We score 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. They don't, and that's where you get to your 34-17 or 34-20, whatever the case may be. But, yeah, we're in agreement there. Jen, what's going on? Have we missed any? Has there been any big upsets, anything that's going to be fun to talk about?
Nothing yet. It looks like Missouri and Arkansas is supposed to kick off, but it doesn't look like it has yet for some reason. Not really for sure why.
Good old Iowa, Nebraska, 13-10.
Yeah, a big old yes.
They hit the under. Is it final?
Yeah,
13-10 final.
Yeah.
The lowest, you heard that right here at the Renegade Report on the Renegade Rundown first, guys. The lowest, I believe it was the lowest over-under in the history of college football at like 24.5 points. And if it was 10-13, that makes it 23 points. And they successfully hit the under. Whoever bet the under on the smallest over-under of all time. That is freaking unreal.
Yeah,
unreal.
I'm kind of interested to see this Missouri and Arkansas game, them play each other just because of the common opponent, obviously. But yeah, and I think the other thing with Florida, though, I'm just going to say one more thing. Yes, at home, they've been really good. Versus Charlotte, they had to kick a bunch of field goals, right? And Arkansas. And Tennessee has beaten absolutely nobody.
Yeah.
Like nobody. Any team they played, they've gotten the doors blown off of them that has a pulse. So,
hold on now, Jen. I will not allow any kind of shit talk about Tennessee. Have you seen the quality losses they have? They lost to Georgia and Alabama.
Right, badly.
You want to talk about they don't
badly.
have anything on their
And
schedule.
Missouri badly, and Florida badly. Let's just go down the list.
It kills me,
all
man.
their-
Missouri and Tennessee, they just I'm with you. I cannot wait for bowl season. I want to see this weekend and bowl season.
I can see why Missouri, I don't know that they should be ranked 9, but I don't, that's different. But Tennessee for me is the biggest joke. It is the biggest showing that the committee or whoever, whoever we want to blame, wants to make Georgia's schedule look better, or Alabama's, whichever one it is. That's a prop up, because there is no way on God's green earth that team should be ranked right now. There is none, and nobody can tell me anything different. You have other 4-loss teams that actually have a win, and they're ranked ahead of some 3-loss teams that have a win. Tennessee has no win, nothing. Yes. Oh, okay. Kentucky.
How much would Clemson be ranked favored by over Tennessee? 10 points?
I would say probably.
And they're behind them in the polls. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're not scoring on that defense.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think Clemson takes the ball away. But I would say maybe 10.5. I would say 10.5. They'd probably be favored.
Now, while I got you here, Mr. Coger, look, we got to talk recruiting. Look, Florida State has come, a long ways. We've averaged, I believe, number 20 over Mike Norvell's first 3 years. He didn't take a ton of guys, so his average wasn't, what you would usually think of a 20 class. It still hovered around 90, supplemented with the transfer portal, and that's a whole nother conversation. But high school recruiting is up to number 3 in the nation, with a very firm possibility to pop to number 2, to possibly make a run at number 1 with some of these signing day flips. Okay, let's get the stuff off the board that everybody knows if they pay attention to the Renegade Report. But look, we got a linebacker that we're after right now. He's actually a safety. He's a top 100 player, I believe, in the 247 composite, a guy named Coy Parrish, okay? I think he's going to be that stud linebacker to come in. Also, as far as a guy who's going to come in to be a DB, we have a guy in Kai Bates who was recently decommitted from a team he played 2 years in a row in LSU. That's somebody who gets an eye on you watching their LSU team, and man, you get him to decommit, and we'll see what happens. But everybody and their mama is expecting Kai to flip and join this Noles recruiting class, who also recently had C.J. Hurd, somebody who is kind of similar to Coy Parrish. He's a hybrid safety linebacker type. He drops off. If you can bring Kai Bates in, another top DB, you pretty much cement yourself as the best DB class in the nation. And you start to get some real help for the linebacker room with a guy like Parrish. You bring in Bates and Parrish. Who else is that next big guy that you see? Are you hearing anything out there about Jeremiah Smith, any of these other big names? Is there some name out there you really expect to see? Do you agree with me on Parrish? Where are you at on recruiting, dog?
Yeah, I think the two that you mentioned are the big ones to watch with Bates. And then, of course, when you're making room for people in the class, and that's what happened with C.J. Hurd. A lot of people, it's not necessarily decommitment as much as it's a shake hands, go your both way, and make for that, make room for that. But I'm hoping that they can get Jeremiah Smith. I think that's really going to be one that you want to see yank in this class, because And I really do think, too, one of the important things is you're seeing the development of or at least the performance of these wide receivers. I don't think we really developed Keon, but Johnny, I think we had a hand in that development. You're seeing Hakeem come on and just being able to sell that development and then pushing guys to the NFL. We all know Keon is more than likely going to end up in the NFL after this year. So I think now you can point to that with these recruits. We can put you in the NFL. We are winning on the field better than any other team in the state. And then also, now that you're going to get to see Tate, what if Tate comes out in these next 2 games and throws for, 300 yards a pop and 3 touchdowns in each game? Then these receiver recruits sitting right here going, man, okay, I knew we had a question of who was going to be the quarterback next year, but if you got a guy who out here is throwing the ball, then, you got Brock Glenn coming behind him, and then you got Cromanhawk coming in this year as well. Once they start to see that I can be a part of something that is moving, they have the pieces to accentuate my skill set, I think it's going to be it's going to become whoever they want to get. because people are going to want to be a part of that. And also you see the good atmosphere, you see the brotherhood mentality. Unfortunately, like with Jordan going down, everybody's supporting everybody. So man, it's just really like, it's such a great time right now. And that's why this game is so important. You know, somebody asked like, what would you rather, if you had to pick a loss, and I've assumed just win both. So I screw the question, but would you rather lose to Florida or rather lose to Louisville or whatnot? And I'm like, you know, I get it. You want to beat Louisville because you put a trophy in the hardware case, something Miami hasn't done in 2 decades. Like that would be a big accomplishment. Right. So, but you know, this is such a huge game for recruiting when you talk about this Florida game, because if you can beat them and you can show that this is now 2 years in a row, you beat both in-state rivals, you really have the state of Florida in a chokehold right now. And if you can go 2-0 against your rivals 2 years in a row, and, you know, next year's looking tough for Florida with their schedule, the way things are going, their recruiting class is falling apart. Miami still can't figure it out on the field. Like, this is a really crucial time, and this would be a huge step in recruiting to go out and beat Florida in their place with essentially a backup quarterback. He's not your backup anymore, but you know what I mean.
There's no doubt. It's crazy, like the ability, if you can go and land that number 1 recruiting class on Florida's falls apart, Miami's obviously is what it is with all the 3 stars, and then you can go into 24 and continue the streak, beat both of them again, possibly be in it for the ACC championship again. Like you said, you got the state of Florida done. You're looking at going into the Big Ten, you know, being in 2 playoffs in a row. It's really a beautiful thing, similar to 2010, 2011, 2012 when Jimbo took it over. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep it in that chokehold. But, yeah, the sky is the limit. But let's get Jen in here. I know Jen, she's got some connections behind the scenes. You know, we can't say them out loud, but she knows a little bit more than you guys might think. You know, let's get Jen's top. What's your 3 kind of keys moving forward that you're looking for in recruiting? Not trying to put you on the spot. Just what do you think? Anything in particular you're looking at or that they need to do better?
So Jeremiah Smith, I think, is going to be at the Florida State game this weekend. Correct? Yep. I'm a little bit less convinced that he's a flip possibility to Florida State. Not because I don't want him to, not because I don't think they could. However, because I think that Ohio State is really pulling out all the stops on this one. And he does like Brian Hartline. Now, here's where I would watch it, okay? There is a coaching position open at Texas A&M, right? I know that there's some rumors going around that it's Ryan Day. I would watch for Elko, in my opinion, to Texas A&M, and for Duke to look at Brian Hartline. That would be fit. And just so you guys know, this shit doesn't come out of thin air, okay? No.
You may think she's saying this stuff in passing, but just pay attention. She knows what she's talking about, especially when it comes to this coaching hire stuff.
I'm not saying that there's anything like in the works. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, look for those dominoes. If those dominoes fall, I think that, you know, obviously Jeremiah Smith would be a way higher for me. Now, again, I'm not saying that they couldn't flip him right now, even if none of those things happen. It's just for me, you know, he's been committed to them for so long. Ohio State is really pulling out the stops for him. Could it happen? Absolutely. If he does flip, it would be to Florida State. I think Miami and Florida are really clowning themselves, even imagining that.
Yeah.
I know Miami had a huge post. I think I posted it the other day about how Mario should take some of his salary and give it. Oh my God, it was so funny. I don't, it's not that I don't believe. I think it could happen. For me, when you're committed for that long and you have such a great relationship with that assistant coach, and they're really pulling out the stops, as you can tell. But that doesn't, you know, hey, who knows? If Florida State goes in there and he watches them this weekend and they have a blowout, oh my God. I mean, he could do it that night. We just don't know.
Yeah. And I go back to Landon Thomas, and it's like the dude's been on call, you know, he's been on campus so many times. It's like he's been here for a reason. And the only reason those 2 schools are pulling out all the stops all of a sudden is for one reason. And I don't know if you can come back from that shit where he was liking all the negative Keon Coleman stuff, trash.
I don't know either.
And he comes back and tries to like him. I don't know if you can come back from that. And I'm sorry, I kind of cut off Jesse, but.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, if he is there this weekend, I will say look for the receivers to have a big game because Mike Norvell is always playing 3D chess. You know, you get Blake Nicholson at the LSU game last year, and you have the linebacker scoring touchdowns on offense. So, like, he knows what he's doing. Mike's
Yeah.
smart. He's going to say, listen, this is what we can get you on the field to do here. So, yeah, watch for the receivers to have a big game if he is in attendance.
And we know how much his 7-on-7 coach really loves Mike Norvell and Florida State, right? And we know that Jeremiah Smith does. He said it publicly. He said it publicly many times. I just think that there's a certain relationship there. Now, again, that doesn't mean if he doesn't leave that I don't think it happens. It definitely could. I'm just not sitting here being like, oh, it's definitely going to happen. It's 60, 70, 75% until it does happen, because even if the kid is thinking about it, even if it's something he really wants, Ohio State knows, they know, and they are really pulling out the stops. As much as they say they're not scared, as much as their message board says they're not scared, they're definitely scared.
Yeah, you make a good point. And just keep in mind, you can always get them out of the portal later.
Yep.
So you got to stay in the recruitment because it's not over till it's over.
Man, that's the world we live in now, guys. You got to stay in it. And that's kind of one thing Mike Norvell has not done. He is not going to make himself look, what's the word I'm looking for? Thirsty, if you will. He just they go out and get the guys that want to be Seminoles. He's not going to beg and plead. He's going to tell them, look, it's going to be tough. And it is what it is. I'm glad you brought up coaching. This is something I want to talk about, okay? Patrick Surtain. We talked about how we could have possibly the best defensive back class. Not possibly. We do have the best defensive back class and can even take it up a whole another notch with Kai Bates. But look, here's the thing. Patrick Surtain might be the best hire in all of college football this past year. He's coming in, first time on the field as a DB coach like that. He has blown it out of the water. Been amazing as coaching the guys, recruiting, the whole 9 yards. And when you look at this staff, there's a couple other guys that you could imagine seeing possibly moved. Okay, Norvell went for he wanted to keep everybody together. He wanted to keep consistency. That's what he went for in this year. You had 87% of your production returning, yada yada. So he kept everybody together on these 1-year contracts for a lot of guys. I think 3/4 of the staff is on a 1-year contract. This year we're going into 2024. It's going to be a change. It's going to be a change going, more of a fresh kind of thing. Tate Rodemaker takes over. So I think you could be more inclined to see Mike Norvell possibly make a change or two. So where do you think, Jesse? Are there any particular, you doesn't have to name a bunch of guys, but say who's the one coach you would look at to be the most likely to possibly be processed out, if you will. And, if there's somebody in mind for a replacement, you can let that be known too.
Well, I'm pretty sure 99% of Florida State fans know where you're going to go with this. You're going to go to two names. You're either going to go to your linebackers coach, or are we ever finally, people think we're going to separate with Odell? And I think obviously, we need to get better at recruiting on defensive line. It is what it is. It's fair to say that. But I also think at the same time, man, it's, as much as it is about getting dudes, it's also about the development of the guys, because you've seen guys like, Marvin Wilson or them that come in and they're not bad players, but they don't necessarily make an impact when they were a high 5-star guy, as much as you see a Braden Fisk or something like that making an impact. So the developmental side of coaching, especially at that position, is just as equally important, especially when you look at what they've been able to do in the portal. If they're not getting these high school guys, but they can repeatedly land those guys out of the portal that make a difference, then I'm okay with that, because as long as the pipeline is still there and you can tap it, I really don't care where the production comes from, whether it comes from high school or the portal, as long as the production is there. But I think that's obviously the two names that you're going to look at. But, I just think you got to get some dogs as far as recruiting on the defensive side of the ball. But other than that, man, I really like this staff, and we saw how much that paid off for Bowden, having the consistency and things like that. I think you also have the success that's being sold on the defensive side. Everybody thought our defense sucked for a long time. Everybody wanted to push Fuller out. Everybody said how we were terrible on third downs after Boston College, and then I was reading a stat for our preview show yesterday, and we're third in the nation on third down defense. So, just let it play out. Let's this defense might have to carry us in the next couple games. And if you see a dominant defensive performance, guys are going to take notice of that. So, yeah, I think that's the two spots you highlight. But, at the same time, I think Odell has earned the right to be here just about as long as he wants to be. But, man, because that's going to be a really tough relationship. But I think the development you get from him, that's what you want. So maybe they're a linebacker.
Yeah.
Did you have anything?
I kind of thought the linebackers were a little bit improved this year. I mean, maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
I do.
No, on the
100%.
field.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I also I've got to give Randy Shannon a little credit. Isn't he the top recruiter in the ACC right now? He's like the number one recruiter.
I think so. Yeah.
You know, they do that
Which is
thing by
wild.
area, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's knocking out of the park in his
Yeah.
area, if not the position so much.
And
But, man,
that's
if he
wild.
can get Coy Parrish, you know, I've criticized him, so I'll eat plenty of crow. Look, if Randy can get the guys in here, if he can get those blue chip 1 or 2 guys a year, I'm fine. Keep it. I've always been fine with his coaching. You know, kind of the same thing with Odell. It seems like with the recruiting, but also, and the reason I'm fine with keeping Odell and Randy, if that's what they decide to do going into 24, is like it's a super down year for D-line and linebackers. Really, just kind of those front 7 players. Period.
Yeah.
And it was always going to be the plan to bring in, you know, 5 or 6 defensive line recruits in 2025 anyways. Look, guys, we've hit just about everything. I know Jesse's got to work in a little bit. I told the people we would talk about the ACC tournament and the playoff, not tournament, ACC title and the playoffs a little bit. So we'll just touch on that before we get out of here. Look, there's been so much talk about, can Florida State get left out if they're 13-0? Can they get in with 1 loss? What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? I think everybody knows how I feel. I think Jen feels the same now too. Florida State goes for 13-0. They are in. Just that simple. It would be just the biggest travesty in the world if they didn't. But at the same time, the kind of logic that this playoff committee uses week to week is a complete joke. They're constantly, you know, kind of contradicting themselves. But I'm here right now. I'm going to stand 10 toes down and say Florida State makes the playoff. I'm predicting we get in there. We go out there and handle business against Louisville. I look at Louisville and I see a team with a worse defense than they had last year. They just didn't play an Atlantic schedule that had the top 5 teams in the SEC completely destroying each other. Louisville missed everybody for the most part. They missed
Brownlee.
Clemson. They missed the Florida State. Yeah, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I can't wait to get another shot at him.
Yeah, come on. I can't with this. And he is posting just like, he's like, oh, we're in the championship, the title game and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be out there feasting. Feasting on whom? Because
now we have Keon Coleman and Jaheim Bell. Good luck.
Like,
good
who are
luck.
you? Sir, I have a feeling those wide receivers are going, oh my God, I'm getting paid this weekend. I am getting paid.
But I guess the question that I was going to ask you too, and we'll start with Jesse, is just with losing Jordan Travis and bringing the backup quarterback and seeing what the playoff committee has done, is there any scenario in this world that you worry about at 13-0? And just kind of what are your thoughts? Are there any hot takes you have concerning the playoff committee and this final 14 playoff and how it affects Florida State going forward?
Yeah. I'll say this in kind of 2 ways. I will say, first off, I think if Florida State wins the next 2 games, I think they're in. I know I give old Boo a lot of crap here, but at the same time, old Boo Corrigan, I know I give him a lot of crap. But at the end of the day, what he said last week when Kirk and Reese had this coming out of nowhere narrative, they just spent the whole show talking about how Florida State should get jumped by a 1-loss team. He really didn't seem to take the bait on that. He seemed to kind of sound more like, yeah, I mean, I get that, but you're talking about an undefeated conference champion. So I think if Florida State wins, they get in. I think you have 2 games here that are very winnable for Florida State, but they also come in the form of, although you feel they're winnable, it's a rivalry game on the road against an SEC team and potentially a top 10 matchup against Louisville if they beat Kentucky. So if you win both of those games, I think that is enough of a resume post Jordan Travis to show that, okay, man, we went to the swamp. We beat Florida with our, I can't call him backup anymore, but with Tate Rodemaker at quarterback, and you beat a top 10 Louisville team in a neutral site game. That's about all you can ask for, because right now that Louisville is the best win on your schedule if you beat them. So like you can say it's LSU, but rankings wise, that's the best win on your schedule. And you did it with Tate. Yeah. So that's a good enough thing. Now I will say my rooting interest has changed a little bit over the last few weeks. Normally I'd like chaos at the top, but in a perfect world, I think you need a couple of things that would really help you out. I think one, you got to have Louisville win this weekend. Now they will still be ranked, even if they lose to Kentucky. They're not going to fall 15 spots. It's just, they're going to be a top 20 team. But I also would not be mad at having Georgia just kind of go ahead and eliminate Alabama in the SEC title game, give them that second loss. That also drags down Texas's best win there. And then I would like to see Washington go ahead and also eliminate Oregon, just so those two top one-loss teams, you're not there where you have that conversation of, all right, well, you got Georgia that hasn't lost a game in 2 years, gets beat, I don't know, say 28-27 in overtime by Alabama, who's now the SEC champion. Where do they stack that up? Because we know the committee, they don't really make a lot of sense. They already put Florida State's best resume, before in the initial rankings. They put the second best resume at 4th. When you talk about the Michigan whole conversation, technically by the standards that they set, Washington should be number 2 because they have a better resume than Michigan.
Should be 5.
So I don't think you can count on them to do things that make sense. But I think if you go out and you beat Florida in the Swamp, an SEC team, you beat a top 10 Louisville team in a neutral site game with Tate at quarterback, I think that's enough to push you over the edge. I think the swap, I will say this before I kick it back to you, I think the swap from 4 to 5 was coming anyway.
Yeah,
I know they don't talk about Jordan Travis, his injury being influenced in that because it's not supposed to. I think that just that made it a little easier to stomach that move. But I think that move was coming regardless.
Yeah, I agree. And you got anything on that, Jen, before we get out of here?
No, I agree. And I think when you and I talked about it that night after Jordan was hurt, I was kind of just saying to Florida State fans, hey, guys, this is going to happen. This narrative is going to come out. They were already spinning it that morning on game day, even before Jordan was hurt. This was going on before. At the end of the day, the committee, if Florida State takes care of business, the committee is not going to keep Florida State out. They are a Power 5, like blue blood brand that brings eyeballs. And at the end of the day, it's just not going to happen. And as many of Dan Walkins and Paul Feinbaum's and everybody else can get all worked up about it, again, I'd like for Kirk and for Reese to let me know where on the doll of Florida State hurt you with wherever this is going, because they are really driving this home. But it's still just not going to it's not it. They're trying to make fetch happen, and it's not happening. I'm sorry.
All right,
if they
man.
take care of business, but they have to take care of business. That's all.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Well, look, guys, this has been a great episode. I know you've got to get to work. Go ahead and plug what you got, man. Let these guys know where they can find you, what you got coming up, so they can look up Plant the Spear, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. Obviously, you can check out plantthespear.com. That's our hub for everything, links to everything, articles, YouTube, all that good stuff. Check us out on YouTube, Plant the Spear. Always on social media, Plant the Spear. You can find us there. We love to get our jabs in during rivalry week. I've been posting all kinds of fun little memes and stuff against Florida. So definitely make sure you go check that out. I got them spun up on Facebook. They are so mad about the FSU runs the state. I switched like their stadium where it's like, this is the Swamp.
State champs.
Yeah, man, I switched it to FSU runs the state, and I got the Florida fan base in shambles over there, so it is fun. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it. Just check us out over there. I'm I know I'm excited for Saturday, but man, my mouth is watering for next week. I live 45 minutes from Bank of America Stadium. I've been waiting 8 years for this game to be back, Florida State to be back in Charlotte. So man, I'm just so excited for that.
Good luck on those credentials, man. I hope you get them.
Yeah, so I will see you guys around Charlotte. Like if you're there and you see me, definitely I'll probably be just linking up with the Charlotte Seminole Club and what they got going on. So you guys make sure to say hey if you catch me up there. But again, man, I appreciate you having me on. It's always a good time.
For sure, man. And we will see you next time. I got one little rant for the guys on the transfer portal before I get out of here. But yeah, man, we sure appreciate you and hope to have you on soon, man.
Yes, sir. You guys have a good one.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
We will see you next time. Yes, sir. Always.
Now, do you want me to jump off?
Jen,
or are you?
You can hang out or jump off either way. Doesn't matter. But I just got to get this one off of my chest, man. What do you want to do? You want to hang out and comment on it?
I'll watch you. I'll watch you.
All right, guys. Yeah, for sure. Jen has been awesome, guys. A round of applause. I know she can't hear it, but you guys let her know in the comments how great she has been. And if y'all have any questions for her, she can answer them after this rant here. But I want to get a little rant here. I had a guy on Twitter, as you call it, X, giving me shit about talking about the transfer portal. You know, the last game hasn't even been played. The season isn't even over. It's pathetic. You Florida State guys in this transfer portal and this, that. Okay, that's fine. Well, he's got me fired up, so I want to talk about it. Okay, Florida State, Mike Norvell, what he's done with the transfer portal and completely changing the way kind of guys look at building teams and getting an edge from it while simultaneously only recruiting in the top 20s with high school to be able to build a legitimate playoff contender is something that's never been done. It's something that I talked about before the season started. I talked about it 18 months ago. I told everybody Mike Norvell was like kind of looking ahead of a curve that nobody's even seen yet. Lo and behold, here we are. And look, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Jordan Travis. Unfortunately, the gruesome injury, we lost him, but just so many. I believe at one point it was 15 of the 22 starters are transfers. But these aren't transfers that just came in mercenaries. 1 year guys coming to get a paycheck rentals. These are guys that Mike Norvell brought in throughout the 21-20 season, the 22 season, gradually 10 to 12 guys a year, and he built a team. He got guys like Johnny who's going to stay here for 3 years, Jared Verse who's here for 2 full years, and it seems like he's here for 4 years. You've got guys on their 4th and 5th year out of the transfer portal. And contrary to what the rest of kind of Nole Nation is talking about, if you watch a lot of these other podcasts, they're going to tell you that, look, Florida State doesn't have to count on the portal this year as much as they have in the past. I'm here to tell you that may be true. They may not have to count on the portal as much. They may not go after as many offensive linemen because we have so many young guys coming up. We have so many good wide receivers coming in they may not sign for. But here is what they are going to do, and what Mike Norvell has continued to do every year that he's been here. He is going to get the very best possible players that he can get that fit the mold of a Florida State football player and the Mike Norvell, kind of program. And that's what he's going to do. This past year before the season started, I told everybody this was going to be a different kind of transfer portal class than what we've had in the past. In the first couple of years, we had to get diamonds in the rough. We had to get a guy like Jermaine Johnson, who only though had 5 sacks in his career. We knew he was a stud. If we could get him from Georgia, he could be a star from us. A guy from, ASU and Johnny Wilson, who only had a couple hundred yards, but a #1 PFF grade in blocking. If we could get him over here, we could polish that thing into a diamond. And sure, here it is. We've got him kicking ass for us. And that's the kind of thing he's done in the transfer portal, and he's not going to stop. This year, Mike Norvell is going to go out, and in my opinion, is going to get 10 to 12 guys, just like he has year in, year out. But closer to last year, and even more to an extreme level, it is going to be only elite guys. There's not going to be some giant holes to fill. There's kind of some depth issues at defensive line. We may try to grab 3 or 4 defensive linemen. We'll see how that pans out as we get guys. People forget about Daryl Jackson and Ibami Tafase coming down the line, Daniel Lyons, some of these younger guys who are going to be just fine at defensive line. But long story short, he's going to get an all-star team of transfer players. He's going to go out there, and you're going to get the best player overall off a UTEP team. You're going to get the best damn player off of a damn Missouri, off of Oklahoma State. These guys are just they're going to give a shot, and they're going to come to Florida State. These all-American type players, and who knows, you may get 3 Keon Coleman types next year, or you may get none. But look, I'm here to tell you we're going to get multiple, and don't buy the shit about the shaming around the transfer portal, and you got to start freshmen. You want to look around at guys like Miami and Florida that dogged it and trashed it and negatively recruited Florida State for the past 2 and 3 years about the portal, and you got to process these freshmen, this and that. What are they doing now? They're all writing articles about how it's time to attack the portal. Florida can't wait around. They can't try to get the last visit. No. They got to get guys on campus first. They've got to be quick. And Miami has to attack. They're going to go attack and get a quarterback out of the portal. Well, sorry about your luck, guys, because you're not going to do it as good as Mike Norvell. You're not going to do it as good as Florida State. And even though Florida State will have a top 3 recruiting class, possibly the #1 recruiting class in the entire nation, guess what, guys? They're still going to have the best fucking portal class. And I'm here to tell you, this is how it's going to be. But anyways, that's going to about do it, man. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Jen, did you have anything to add to that? Sorry, I had to get that off my chest.
No, you're good. I think that was perfect. And I mean,
alrighty.
Yeah, good job.
Well, I know you're about to go out, have some fun tonight. Go out there and have a good time. Thanks again. Look, I can't thank Jen enough. She's a great co-host. Couldn't be happier to have her join us here. She's been a huge blessing for the show. So y'all be nice to her. Make sure you go follow her at Jen Santee 1890 on X, and you can find her at Jen Santee on all the platforms, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff, and follow all her stuff. And we love y'all. Go Noles, baby.
Go Noles.
See you next time.